We sat down with the founder of the leading platform that tracks all radio plays in real time to build a solution that can measure the impact of a single radio play. Jesper, you are founder and CEO of WOM, which is by far the widest and biggest radio monitoring service. I think you have over 20,000 radio stations, 25,000 radio stations that you're monitoring. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
And what is the challenge that you got for us today?
So the challenge is that in the world of radio, it is very difficult to understand what the actual value of a radio airplay is worth on the publishing side. So we have neighboring rights on publishing. But on the publishing side, it is really difficult to understand the value, the metrics, the minute value, like basically a measurement
Yep.
for how to calculate a radio airplay, the value of a radio play. So, for example, you can figure out what the value is on BBC One, for example, or BBC Two, bigger radios in certain countries. But for a lot of people, we work across borders, right? So an artist from Belgium signs a song to a record label in Holland, which is made up by songwriters from Poland and Sweden or whatever. But so this is kind of like the challenge is figuring out how can a songwriter from Poland know what the worth is of a song's radio airplay in, for example, radio stations in the UK or Germany, for example.
And why is this challenge worth solving?
Because there is really not a system for this. The publishing administration, let's say societies, the PROs, often report to each other. So it's not really, there's not so much controlling, basically. Each country represents, has a monopoly, or each society has a monopoly for each country, and then they have this gentleman agreement of reporting to each other. But this also means that depending on how the structure is in the country, is very depending on how the ways of calculating the songs are.
And who is affected by it most?
Obviously the publishers, but in particular the songwriters.
Yeah.
For them, obviously, it's super valuable to understand if this play on this radio paid nothing or €100 per minute.
I see. So in terms of the most relevant stakeholders, there's publishers, there's songwriters, and then we probably also have to consider the collecting societies when it comes to finding a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will say the collection societies, they collect the money, right? And then they distribute them. So actually for them, it's not, I mean, they don't have the same interest as I see it in the transparency as, for example, the publisher or the songwriter in the end, because to be fair, they need to distribute it the best way possible. But that's up to the individual to determine what that means.
At the same time, at the end of the day, they are involved in this whole value chain when it comes to knowing what song has been played on a radio station all the way down to actually making the payouts. Is that assumption correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just we basically want to build something where you can follow it all the way, right? So it's just to say, from my point of view, it's okay that some radios are, let's say, paying so small amounts of money that the society determines that, for whatever reason, it's not worth to distribute this accurately. We need, sample testing or other ways of distributing it. The real, it's just important that it gets distributed in the best possible way, right?
Can you quickly walk us through the existing process of this distribution?
In terms of how the money is distributed now?
how it looks like in terms of with this existing challenge of a radio play. How is it determined right now?
It's up to the individual society, right?
So it's the society that determines the value of an airplay.
Well, basically, it depends on the individual country, right? So there is like whatever they do in Germany might not be the same way as they do it in UK or the same way they do it in Belgium or whatever. So
But at the end of the day, it's the collecting society who's responsible.
they have the
of
mandate, they
determining.
have the monopoly, so to speak. They have the power to collect and distribute the money coming from publishing in this particular country, right?
So when it's about solving the challenge, it's important to consider these collecting societies.
Of course.
Because to my understanding, at the end of the day, they are the ones who say, okay, here it's an airplay and that's worth, I don't know, 20 cents.
Yeah, but of course it's very depending on the size of the radio station and what type of radio it is. And if you take something like GEMA in Germany, they have probably one of the most complicated ways to calculate a value of an airplay. They have a cultural factor, a broadcast coefficient, and various elements in this model, whereas some other countries it's more straightforward or easier to calculate.
Did you try solving this challenge so far?
I did, yeah, and basically we also did solve it. What we found, but in a limited way. So we tried to do it around on 5 countries, but we never made it as a product where we took it to market. It just stayed as a MVP.
Okay, why?
Because I found that it is extremely time-consuming, basically, to manage all these different rates associated to all the different radios in the different countries, updating the rates. Some societies, they change the rates every quarter. Some does it every year.
Yeah.
Some does it per second value, per play, per minute. It's just every time you open up a new country, the rules are completely different. There's no unified system, which would obviously make it a lot easier if we had like a unified way of calculating this in Europe, for example.
Before transitioning into the solution ideation, what is the potential that you personally see when it actually is solved? What's the impact of it?
I think that the impact would be tremendous, basically, because it would mean that everyone would know what the value actually is, and this would of course means that you can suddenly start figuring out how much you are owed. It can open up more frequent payments. The societies or publishers can take more risk in the sense of making upfront payments because they have a better understanding of calculating what is coming. So basically it would mean faster payments, more transparency. It would mean less myth or mystical conversations around radio. You would know exactly how the value is for this. In some ways there can be other values of radio, right? If a radio station do not necessarily have a minute value in a monetary way, it can still have impact. Let's say it's a drum and bass radio and you make drum and bass music, and the fans, the audience are 5,000 drum and bass fans, then that the value of reaching that audience is also great, basically. But of course you also want to be paid for the exposure of the music.
Awesome. We will now transition into the solution ideation. At this point, I'm going to start a timer, and the 30 minutes starts now. So, based on the challenge that you elaborated, we, in the meantime, while we were discussing the challenge, we already started brainstorming solution ideas. And the first thing that you, in the end of describing the challenge, also already quickly touched is around finding a system that unifies it, establishing a centralized database that aggregates verified radio play data from ideally all the countries out there. In that effort of establishing a centralized database, what are crucial things that we would have to consider?
We have to consider that each country has, let's say, have their own way of accessing it, right? So, for example, if I go to Coda's webpage, then you will find rates transparently on the website. You don't have to log in. You can see it on a majority of the radio stations. But for example, if you go to PRS, you need to log in. And so if you're not a direct member of PRS, you cannot log in. And the same in France, but then it's also in French.
I see.
So it's kind of like the same.
So in some countries, it's public information. In other countries, you have to be a member to get to these rates.
And some are just not transparent at all. So even though you can log in, you cannot access it.
So transparency is above everything.
Yeah, again, like it's like, as I mentioned before, there can be good reasons for not putting a minute value of a radio. You know, let's say it's a small radio, it pays €2,000 a year or whatever to be a radio or to broadcast, and the value would be like cents, you know, or fractions of cents. Then I understand it, but it's still important to understand then that this radio is not paying, or the society is not distributing this money from this radio based on this, so that there's transparency about the rates, but also if there is a rates associated to the channel or not.
So in that effort of establishing such a unified centralized database, the first thing to solve is accessing the data. So we would have to find a way to establish a process that works in an optimized way that accesses these data. So that's the first step. Once we manage to access all these data, I'm under the assumption, and at this point you can please give me some insights into it, that the data might not all be in the same format or structure. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you try and get the information from two different societies, for example, you will see that it is quite different.
So harmonizing these data at the point where we can access them is the next step that has to happen, that we find a smart way on how we can harmonize these data so that we get to a point where in a centralized database, they are actually all in the same format and structure to actually make them comparable.
Which is totally doable. If something is based on per second, you know, and the other one is based on per minute, that's easy to solve, right?
Yeah. So one factor being the time, if it's a second unit or a minute unit. What are other factors to consider?
I mean, I think this is primarily the main thing that is, you know, 90% of the task is to basically identify the individual stations and figuring out whether there is a rate associated or not, and if there is, how is that understandable?
And to make it understandable, what else is relevant to keep in mind if we would come up with such a database? What else should be in there?
I mean, as many countries as possible.
Okay.
But of course, I would say that prioritizing the countries, let's say, based on the, you know, how big they are musically, like UK, Germany, France, Spain, would be a great place to start, right? You know, if we can take some European countries where at least there is like functioning systems. You know, we can also find a country in Africa where there's not even a society existing. You know, so then it's going to be difficult. In the U.S., for example, you don't get paid publishing on radio. You know, so it's I think it's important to focus on Europe to start, and then get as many countries as possible, because that's also what I found was the challenge of scaling it, is that we can do it with, you know, 3-4 countries, but if it really should change something, there should be like 30 countries, 50 countries, right? And that's where it's going to be super challenging.
So at that point, to quickly summarize, in that database where we managed to access and harmonize data from ideally all countries out there, starting with the most important ones that make also a big portion of the data, we consider the time as a unit. Is there anything else that is relevant to determine, or would it just be a sheet where it's different countries and artists and the time?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think it's not a complicated thing. There's not really a lot of things to take into consideration. There's not a lot of things that needs to be solved, which is also actually why I feel it's a little bit frustrating to see. I mean, I started my company 8 years ago, and nothing I feel has changed in this sense. And even in the European Union level, it seems like that even in 2017, I believe, there was legislation around that this should be transparent. But it's again like an interpretation, like what is transparent? Transparent to who? To your members or to the European members? And so, but in reality, I don't think it's complicated. It's just consuming, and it's difficult to access the right information at the right level.
So that is actually the complicated part, this first step of accessing.
Yeah.
So this is where we should focus on with that solution.
Yeah.
Finding a solution of accessing and optimizing that process.
Yeah, and then of course maybe prioritizing, as I said before, UK, Germany is a great place to start, but again, like Poland, Belgium, Spain, France, how will we be able to access this information?
Then let's dive deeper into the accessing part, as it seems to be the most critical in the effort of coming up with solution. To access the data, there is different ways of accessing the data, as we already described. We came up here with a note around audio fingerprinting providers, around integrating ACR Cloud or BMAT.
BMAT.
Yeah, BMAT.
So good.
Then there's also Grace Note to detect plays from streams and archives.
But you know, there's a lot of fingerprinting solutions, and fingerprinting and music recognition is already quite integrated in the music industry in different ways. And like in my case, we've done that since 2017. So it exists, and it's not, you know, most of the technologies out there or the providers provide really good services. So it's not about the technology's capabilities or something like that. It's more about unifying it all in you know, the transparency issue. So whether you use this vendor of fingerprinting technology or this, it's not really
okay. So fingerprinting is not the.
But of course, it will be part of the solution. But
but it would be
one
rather,
vendor is just as good as.
But it would be rather about considering these vendors in a solution in the form of an integration.
Yeah, but I mean, we can provide that already to the tool if we want. That's kind of like
that's what I mean. It's not something that we have to build ourselves.
No, we can provide that as well, but or others can provide it. I don't think that's gonna be an issue, to be honest.
So back to the real issue, the
Yeah.
accessing of data. And in that core idea, it's about finding a way to turn every radio play worldwide into a standardized and traceable data point, like currency in that sense. Still, to me, where I'm with my head, it really is about accessing the data. Is there, there's, in my opinion, it's worth digging still deeper there from what I'm hearing from you, since this really seems to be the issue. So let's actually take a look at the origin, because we access the data from whom?
We would usually
In different countries, yeah.
Yeah, so we will go through a society,
Exactly,
right, who have
yeah.
the mandate to collect and distribute the money on behalf of radios, for example, in particular country.
So we have to look at the collecting societies. And if we now take a look at the most relevant countries, can you give me a concrete example of how this data access looks like? Because you mentioned some of them is public, others is in member areas. Is it these two scenarios, or is there other scenarios as well?
I mean, it's mainly that. I mean, there's a bit more. I mean, in the end, it is like either you can get it relatively simple or you can't.
Okay.
And then the next step is, why can't I? Okay, you need an entry. You need to log in here, right? And then you need to figure out how to solve that. But I think, as I mentioned before, with Coda in Denmark, it's a good example of something where it is actually quite transparent. You can see that the voice, radio the voice, pays whatever 4 kroner and 70 cents or whatever. And some radios have a day or night rate, and that's quite transparent with them, for example. But then at the same time, they have, something they call other small radios. And you don't know what radios are under this term. So that's like a next step, right? It's like you have to then contact the society, figuring out what are the radios here in order to, as we talked about before, actually building something that is transparent not only on the top level and the biggest commercial radios, but also with smaller radios.
So to get accurate data and to be able to automate this process, we have to talk to these collecting societies and find an agreement with them of how we can actually access these data.
Yeah, and then you will find that some societies are way more open also to talk about this and be transparent with the data, and some would do everything they can to misunderstand what you want and refuse to tell you the information under a term like we have to we can't disclose what we agree with different radios and what they pay, which is absurd because
So one part of the truth is that there's a technical challenge. The other part of the truth is that there's a cultural or political challenge.
And I think this is the biggest challenge. I think the technical challenges are not that big, to be honest. It's not rocket science. It's like it's relatively easy. It's like this radio pays €4 per minute. We, for example, with one, we detect Airplay, so we can see that this radio station played this song for 20 times. 20 times €4, it's 80. It's not difficult. But again, every time you bring on a new country and you need to determine the radios and segmenting them, you need to have personal, you need to have the conversations with them. They need to open up information. Exactly, that's where it's gonna be tricky and political.
So how I mean, we focus here on mainly on the technical solution. At the same time, do you see ways to incentivize these collecting societies?
Yeah, I mean, I think
to provide us the right access that we would need for such a technical solution?
I think what one way could be to talk with, let's say, society A and say, hey, if you contribute with these rates, we can help make it transparent. Then you would be able to see this in another country. So let's say you have 5 countries contributing, or 5 societies in 5 countries contributing, and they would then be able to see each other's information more transparently. I think that would be
So what
potential.
would be the benefit for them if they have it from these other countries?
Then they will be able to know in advance how much money they should collect, and they can prioritize on the biggest songs. You know, in a lot of ways, I would think that a challenge for them, you know, if we would talk about, would be, well, then we need to monitor all music, and we need, you know, to spend a lot of money on systems and stuff like that. That would probably be the argument.
So let's focus on these benefits and the value, communicating the value to the societies. Initially, you mentioned when we were describing the challenge something around the payout cycles. Do you see the value of such a solution when it comes to shortening these payout cycles? Because obviously, if this solution helps to increase the speed for payouts, it's of value to the collecting societies and their members. Is that something that we could use as a...
That is definitely very valuable, and that could change a lot of things in the, let's say, music industry ecosystem. But I think it's also about smaller artists, you know, upcoming artists, to see that money comes in, you know. It's like, because again, the societies focus on the top down, basically, right? So the biggest radios are most valuable. These are most relevant to have, you know, transparent rates on, or be able to measure it. But let's say the smaller the radio, usually the more independent mindset, in a way. So that means also that more independent music is played on smaller radios, right? It's difficult to be played on BBC One, but you might have an opportunity to be played on Soho Radio. But if Soho Radio does not pay, then you can quickly, as a songwriter, say, then it's irrelevant, because I'm not even benefiting from, you know, promoting that I'm being played if you're the songwriter, right? Because you're not the artist necessarily.
We have around 10 minutes left. Let's quickly discuss who we actually built this solution for, because to do a quick summary, it's all about establishing a sort of centralized database, and to find a middle ground where the collecting societies still maintain the data on their end, but at the same time we can access the data and display what's relevant by harmonizing it. We talked about the challenges aside from the technical part, which are around cultural and political challenges. We also discussed how we can create value for these collecting societies to overcome those potential concerns or challenges for them. Is it a solution that would be... Yeah, I'm wondering, who would this solution be for? So if we have this database, who would actually benefit from it most? Is it something that, who would leverage it? Is it...
But as we talked about, it's like we have, I would say, 3 layers, right?
Yeah.
We have the collection societies first, then they collect the money regardless of how they distribute it, right? So in the end, it's difficult to say that they would really benefit, right? It's like, in theory, yes, but in practice, they collect the money regardless, right? So they distribute it, but it's more about what methods they use to distribute it for it to reach the right people. You know, you can. That's also why if you see like major labels, for example, and you take like sample testing, you know, so you have this these 10 radio stations, and you will then, they pay €1,000 each, let's say, so you have 10,000, and then you will distribute this to based on market share. Then who would have the biggest market share? Would be the majors, because that's how it works, right? If you take if you listen to 100 songs on a radio, chances are that, you know, let's say 50% of them are major labels, right? So if you look at from the major label perspective, it's less relevant to or major publisher is to see the individual people who needs the other half, because you will still collect the other half. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
So we have the societies, we have the publishers, and then we have the writers.
Exactly, it's these three layers. And who would we build a solution for?
Well, in the end, for the writers, right, and the composers. But in order for them to, let's say, get the value in the end, we need the support of the publishers, because they are basically the ones collecting the money, right, or handling or administrating it. The songwriter is not collecting the money directly at the radio.
Hazam, what have you been thinking of in terms of type of product?
The main thing I'm thinking about is what you basically focused on. There is incentive for these collecting societies to join or not. And I see it as it could be two ways, either from a policy perspective, like you said, on an EU level, because at the end they have the monopoly, it's kind of their responsibility also to be transparent. Or do you see it actually, would it be possible as a movement, putting pressure on these societies from the community? Would this also be possible?
Yeah, I think one thing doesn't exclude the other. I think it could be both, probably, and it probably should be both. Of course, changes comes when there is political pressure, and that comes usually from a movement or, you know, a group of people that decide something is not fair.
Yeah, in terms of the solution, like the way I'm thinking about it, because it's pretty straightforward, like you said. Basically, I'm thinking about like a centralized place where you see each society, how much they pay, you can compare, you can also see in advance.
Who would leverage this centralized information?
I think it could work for the societies themselves. They can see what they owe to other societies, what are they getting, they can forecast their earnings. It could also work for the general public, or maybe the artists, the writers, they can compare how much they're getting paid.
Yeah, and it's also a branding thing. I think it's also about building trust towards their members, and telling them we actually take it seriously, trying to figure out how much money you should be paid rather than guessing.
Yeah. And actually, I had this thought, I don't know how practical it is, but in a way, it could be some sort of certification that this society adheres to transparency. They get this kind of label. Exactly. Yeah. This also some sort of incentive.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 5 minutes on the clock, so I think you should get back into focus.
Sorry, Will.
Wrapping up things. That was just relevant for me to know. In these remaining 5 minutes, with that centralized solution in place, let's concretely talk through what you would actually do with these information. Because there's a reason why you started building it, or started building a proof of concept with a handful of countries. What do you do with these information? Why is that relevant for you?
Well, we sell information, right, about whether or not a song was played, what radio, time, duration, stuff like that.
To whom?
To record labels, managers, publishers, artists, booking agents. You know, people can use it for various purposes. Some would use it for, you know, direct royalty collection, evidence to support that, and others would use it more for market intelligence, for example, or tour planning, or controlling radio promotion, or doing your own radio promotion, right? So when we have a client, if they have a radio airplay, it's like either they want to know the value or they want to get more radio plays. So it's like exposure or direct monetization. That's kind of like the two things.
Okay. So these are your existing customer groups primarily, and you see the same customer groups for the solution that we're currently building?
Not necessarily. Like, for example, the radio promoter does not necessarily have an interest in this.
Yeah.
But for them, it's just important whether the song was played or not. And for them, it would probably be more interesting. Maybe this is something we can develop, but on top is like how many listeners, for example. Is there like 1,000 listeners, or is there 1 million listeners? It's also quite relevant usually. People like big numbers.
At the end of the day, would you see a change in the payouts from the collecting societies if such solution was in place? Or wouldn't affect it?
I mean, right now we have a system that favors the big and popular, let's say, songs, right? So we have kind of like what I call the reverse Robin Hood model. You know, you take from a lot of, let's say, poor artists, or, you know, smaller artists being played on smaller radios, and then you basically pay it to the bigger artists. You know, so and it's not only affecting radio, it's also affecting public performance. For example, let's say you go down here to a restaurant, and let's say the restaurant plays jazz or whatever. There is a good chance that Boomer Stemmer do not know what this restaurant, what music this restaurant is playing. So, but the restaurant will still pay money to Boomer Stemmer, and then Boomer Stemmer will pay this out based on, let's say, looking at some radio stations, maybe comparing it with Spotify data, and then they say, we expect this restaurant to play Ed Sheeran and Rihanna or whatever, right? Based on whatever they determine. But it doesn't change the fact that the radio still plays jazz, and so the rights holders will never the rights holders will never receive the money.
I see. Okay, Hazam, do you have time for a last update?
Just finishing up things here.
Okay, let's quickly come up with a name for it.
Well, we called it, what was it that we called it? The Royalty Calculator System, RPS.
Okay.
But I guess it's just, we can call it...
do we want to focus it around unity? Because I think it's bringing together all the different data at the end of the day.
Yeah, we have to think about a good name.
Tune Ledger is something that came up here.
Tune Ledger.
I have 2 suggestions.
We have 20 seconds left.
First, Airplay Clarity. Second, Royalty Sync.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, it's a calculator, right? Or it's
a portal that shows you basically all the metrics. Actually, the solution is pretty straightforward. It's more about if we really get like people to join in. So we got the landing page. It's basically illustrating the different things we're going to offer, some metrics, how many countries already joined, the different features of the app.
Let me see. Built for complexity, designed for clarity. I like that.
Sounds wonderful. Yeah, good branding.
Okay, let's walk through the key features of the platform.
So yeah, basically centralizing the data we collect from the collecting societies. So you can have it in one place. You can compare the payment you get in the same reach per minute. You can see if there is like discrepancies, cross-border mapping. We also have some sort of smart detection. We can flag when we really see something that doesn't make sense. There's a big difference, something like this. We can do predictive insights based on historical data. We can forecast, and API integration basically for the societies to have an easier way to join into the system. So less work basically to join. How it works, data aggregation, second step, smart processing, transparency, and verification. And this is what we talked about. They call this transparency badge. I think this could be some sort of certified EU
I think this is a great
label. Advanced payment forecasting. I think the payment issue was one of the things also. And I also illustrated from the collecting society's perspective how you can see how much you owe, how much you owe people, and yeah. Now you sign into the dashboard. You can sign in as a collective society or as artist writer.
And potentially, as we discussed in these 3 layers, there might be a publisher.
Yeah. I mean, the roles, just put there the stuff I'm sure about. So this is the dashboard. You basically see different metrics. You can see valuation rates per country, if it's increasing, decreasing per minute. Smart detection, this is what I called.
If something is wrong,
something should be flagged. This is already from the artist-writer perspective. That's why we see the tracks here. Predictive insights, kind of prediction where it's going to be going. Let's actually also see the other role. So centralized database. Here you can see the different collecting society, which one joined, which one not. Come back to this second. API integration, basically which ones we have active, how to use the endpoints to basically join into the system. And the idea is to make it as simple as possible so people don't really have this burden of a lot of effort to join into the system. And
So at the end of the day, it has to be almost a one-click solution for them, and we make all the hard work around it, the intelligence.
Yeah, and I think the idea basically here is to prove that it's possible and it could benefit, even though there isn't like a big incentive really from collecting societies. But if we really see, like, if we harmonize at least on the EU level, that could we make the case that it's possible, even like on a policy level, it could be pushed. I think even we can get buy-in from societies even before.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and also that that they would have a value for them to look good.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like, well, why aren't you not, transparent?
Yeah, it's more like, of a public
verification.
Pressure or,
Yeah. I would still try to really emphasize the communication of the value for these collecting societies when it gets to a point where we can actually accelerate payouts. From my conversations, since we're also working with the German collecting society GEMA as one of our customers, I know that this is problem that they want to solve, because at the end of the day, it's to their members of value if they can accelerate the payouts. So if we get to a point where we can actually accelerate that process of payouts, that's a first value for sure to these collecting societies, because these regulations, they should, in my opinion, always be a sort of last potential solution if there's no other way to do it. Yeah.
I agree, actually. There is incentive already for the collecting side. Payment issue, if you have to wait 3 months, or I don't know, I think at best case they wait a month to get paid. I think there is incentive like to harm that.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, just because SACIM can prove music was played on like that they owed money from PRS, does not mean that PRS automatically should pay them faster. That's depending on their, rules in their system. That's why I say that each country have their own rules, both in terms of valuing the individual rates per radio, but also how they distribute the money, how they collect them, what methods are used, when they pay out to other societies, how long time they should wait. All these things are not unified in any way, but of course, by building pressure and building transparency around this, one could argue that you should not hold my money longer than necessary. But that conversation, I guess, can only start when there is transparency.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we got it.
Airplay clarity.
We can work on the name.
No, but I mean, I think it's super cool. Nice one. Then you just need to get real data into the end.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll see the real challenge.
Get access.
Okay, so that's it for this episode. You can check out our prototype through the link in the description. And of course, we'd like to know from you how you would have solved this challenge.